So what did you wake up to?
This morning, which is just the radio and the news and the prospect of the hung parliament.
And what happens now? I mean, what are you seeing? Say, let's start with the UK and then look at Scotland.
But I think what happens now is, Brown gets the chance to form a parliament, a government, but he's sitting there with England, knowing that they have 100 majority in favour of the Tories. That creates obvious difficulties in that dialogue that he's about to have and the reaction that's going to come forward. So I think we're in Rumsfeld's territory of unknown unknowns, across the board, whichever way you want to look. This is unknown territory. I think many of them will be looking north to Scotland to see how we did with coalition and now with minority government, and beginning to draw some conclusions from that, and also beginning to be more open to what's been happening across Europe, because this is not unfamiliar territory in Germany and Denmark and wherever.
That's the positive thing. Do you think that people will take time to look at that? Because there seems to be a sort of tribal response to wanting to stick with first past the post and old politics.
Well, I think that tribal response of for sticking with first past the post and old politics seems to be the unique preserve of the Conservative Party at the moment. I think the Lib Dems, Labour and others like ourselves have always been in favour of a fairer electoral system, and the anomaly that is the UK system is now being further exposed to very necessary change, and I certainly hope that happens.
Well, in things like the percentage of the vote that Labour have got is very weak.
Yep.
I mean, I think Labour is clearly going to have to be responsive to a change, to electoral reform, whereas the Conservatives are obviously going to be a lot less responsive on that. Do you think the other parties will back a Brown coalition? Will they try it? Where's your money?
Well, I think my money is that, essentially everything is changing. I think that's the fundamental thing. And I just heard David McCletchie on the radio saying that he preferred first past the post. So I think that choice of verb tells you that things are liable to flex. And I certainly think that that's what people voted for. The pragmatic, intelligent voters have given them a very strong message, and there's a new pluralism in politics that I think has to be recognised, and pluralism in politics demands a fairer voting system. So I think the Tory position is going to be a real weakness, that they're going to have to address this.
Well, what should Scotland do now? I mean, in terms of the political landscape that you're looking at, what should happen or what can happen?
Well, I think Scotland needs to come together to look after Scotland's best interests. I mean, our interests are different, our voting pattern is different, and our aspirations are different. I mean, we all, I think, come together on the issue of wanting a better Scotland. And I think what Scotland needs to do now is to blend these multiple visions into what's best for Scotland. I mean, after all, there's 5.164 million people here in Scotland investing their capital and their lives, bringing up their children in Scotland, bringing up their grandchildren in Scotland. We all want the best possible outcome. So I think we need to start, coming together to get those results. And I think there's always a pragmatism in the Scottish voter. And I think this is part of a rite of passage that's going to see Scotland become increasingly more autonomous towards independence. And I'm happy that we've gone through yet this other iteration that gets us closer to that. It's making Scotland more political, people more politically aware, getting the debate more easily understood. And I think that as we go back into the Scottish Parliament, it's going to take the debate to a different level. And people have got to recognise that Scottish aspirations will not be fulfilled by a Tory government or a coalition that includes the Tories in it.
What will the SNP do in terms of the horse trading that is obviously going to happen now? What are your priorities?
The priorities are Scottish interests and making sure we get the very best deal for Scotland, and that we avoid the savage cuts that have been discussed by all of them, or maybe not discussed to the full extent as will now be the case.
Are borrowing powers in there?
Borrowing powers, tax powers, because clearly the key issue is you cannot shrink your way to greatness. You've got to have the capability of growth. And the key thing for us is having a competitive fiscal system and Scotland coming together as a complete economic system. running all elements of our economy to create something that is very much more competitive. And we now know how to do that. I mean, we've seen the success stories of small nations across the planet over the last 20, 30 years. And we've also now got the wonderful privilege of learning from the mistakes of small countries that can further inform how we get this right. So I think there's a real appetite in Scotland to come together and do something considerably better. I've got some very important meetings coming up this week, bringing together the people who are looking at continuous improvement in manufacturing and business world and applying that to government. And I'm finding a big appetite amongst officials and even people in other parties to see Scotland essentially start to learn the lessons of the past, and instead of being mediocre at public sector procurement, at planning, at building control, and all the building blocks that make for a strong economy, becoming very much better at that and really getting our act together in Scotland. And I think there's a big opportunity.
Say everything that's happened over this campaign and during the night,
yeah,
and the picture you're looking at now, what are you personally going to take away as a lesson to be learned?
I think the biggest lesson is that we have got in Scotland really pragmatic voters who are out to protect Scotland and move Scotland forward. That's a big lesson, and it chimes very much with my attitude over the last 3.5 years, which is essentially getting people in the room and getting them talking and getting them understanding that they have potency and power. What we've now seen is people power, establishing the view that they want to see Scotland configured in a way that's different from down south. And clearly that to me says we can build on that and take a very different Scotland forward and create a greater sense of cohesion with our communities, with our constituencies and with our political parties.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Pleasure.